Welcome back at episode 53, and this is our part 3 on building our web server. And so the majority of this stuff here is going to be the same. This is the same as it was in the previous episodes, which is what we would want, because really we want to be able to constrain all of this express stuff and this sort of stuff into one really, really small place. Our type hasn't changed. We're going to keep this same type. Our app loader also hasn't changed because it just knows how to deal with our type and talk with Express. So that really is not changing at all. We still have our writers, so we can do our OK or not found. We could add as many of these as we wanted. And then we talked about our first filter yesterday, where we could filter on the get or a post if we wanted to. But of course, most web servers or web applications that you would end up writing you're going to want to have essentially multiple routes, multiple things that'll happen differently. So what if for one application you wanted to handle a get and a post? That's exactly what we're going to look into today with multiple routes. Routes maybe not exactly the right term because we're just talking about multiple methods, but we'll get to routes probably tomorrow. But essentially what we're saying is, since our type is web part, that's what everything is, we want to take an array of web parts and be able to return one web part from it. Well, that's pretty interesting. What is that going to look like? If this starts to look like something else that maybe we've seen before, you would be correct. So to find this, how we're going to do this is the way that I'm choosing to implement it. You could implement it in multiple different ways. But the way that I'm going to implement this is with recursion. So we've seen recursion over lists, and we've also seen that JavaScript is kind of wonky with recursion and tail call optimization. If this got to be some number like we had 10,000 web parts in here, this would actually not work, even if we were to provide, even if we were to allow it to be optimized. But so what we're going to do, we're going to call this function choose. And we see that it's going to take an array of web parts, just like we talked about here, and it's going to return a web part. Remember, our web part is a type, but this type takes a function and returns. This type is a function that takes a request and it returns an either of a future of a value. And so we're going to use our fail from helper method that we defined up here as well. But so what we're going to do is we're going to say if there's h. In other words, if we're recursing through and we have a value. In other words, if we haven't gotten to the end of a list, then we're going to see what the result is going to be of passing this request into the head, which is going to return us an either of a future. So we still haven't gone off and done anything. We're just validating if this request coming in is valid for the current handler in our list. So if the result that we retrieve back from that is a write, then we're going to pass that result on through. And if it's not that, then we're going to call choose again with the tail portion of the list. So we're going through the list, and then what we also want to do is we then have to pass in this whole request object again because it's this curry function. But basically, we're just going through. So the first one that matches in this list, we'll take it. So if we get down to the very end and h is no longer anything, if it's null, basically, if we pass the tail of the list in and that tail was an empty list, then we just end up returning fail. Maybe we had filters for get only, and someone issues a post or someone issues a put or something like that. At some point, we have to return a fail, which is going to end up returning a 404 for them. So now that we have this choose, how can we use choose here with our first filter for our method filters, and then also use it with our writer here? So it's going to look similar to yesterday, except that we're still going to have to compose all of our functions together. But what our application can be now is it can be this choose, because choose takes multiple web parts and returns a web part, and load app takes a web part. So now what we can do is we can say our app is the choose of the composition of, if it's a post, then we're going to return OK hello post. If it's get, we're going to return OK hello get. So what'll happen here, and then we, of course, we can then load our app into this application. So what will happen is that if we call this application and we issue with an HTTP method a post, we'll return hello post. If we send it with a get, we'll get a hello get. Notice that if we send it with a get, it's never even going to go down to here. There's no need for it to get down to here because it already matched on this route, if you will. And so what does that look like? Well, if we were to come in here and we were to say curl at this, which is just so happens to be the endpoint for that, then we're going to get a hello get, just as we would expect. And if we curl and pass just blank data, which will default curl to a post, and we issue that, then we get hello post. So we see that it actually works, and it's choosing the route based upon using that recursive function that we had defined to be able to pick which route is going to return a right route rather than a left route. So I hope you enjoyed this. There's our choose at this point. I think tomorrow we'll look into path, so we can start talking about different endpoints maybe. And basically at that point, once we have the endpoint and we have the paths, we have the HTTP method, and we can choose between things, we can write full-on to-do MVC and some cool stuff like that. So that's what we'll look into tomorrow, is being able to filter based upon our path. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks.